They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer mine at room temperature, under spotlights, with 300 witnesses and a live microphone. My name is Merrin, and tonight I'm being auctioned off like a slightly damaged piece of furniture at a charity gala. The program lists me as Lot 47, Dinner with the Boring Husband. My wife Tessa designed the entry herself, describing me as offering adequate company, limited conversation, and predictable dessert opinions. The crowd of Houston's social elite finds this hilarious. I don't. Standing at the back of the ballroom in my rented tux, I watch my wife of 12 years work the stage like she was born for it. Tessa Merrin, chairwoman of tonight's Children's Hospital benefit, radiates the kind of confidence that comes from never doubting you're the smartest person in the room. Her auburn hair catches the chandelier light as she gestures toward the auction display, where my photograph sits between a weekend in Aspen and a signed football jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, Tessa announces, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she uses for donors and city council meetings. Lot 47 offers a unique opportunity. My husband Hayes is an architect. He builds things, which means he's great at structural conversations. More laughter. I notice Marcus Verrin, the event coordinator, watching from the wings with obvious admiration. Marcus has been organizing charity events for the better part of 5 years, ever since he moved to Houston from somewhere back east. Tonight he wears a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His wife Selah sits 3 tables away from the stage, applauding Tessa's comedic timing with the measured enthusiasm of someone who's perfected the art of public appearances. Hayes enjoys long walks, Tessa continues, preferably to the refrigerator. He has strong opinions about foundation engineering and can explain the difference between load-bearing walls and decorative columns for hours. The winning bidder gets dinner at Houston's finest restaurant, where Hayes will absolutely insist on ordering the salmon. He always orders the salmon. The crowd eats it up. I see familiar faces. Colleagues from my firm, neighbors from our subdivision, board members who've known me since I started donating to this charity 15 years ago. They're all laughing at Tessa's carefully crafted portrait of matrimonial mediocrity. What they don't know is that I've been preparing for this moment for 6 weeks. 6 weeks ago, I noticed something odd about Tessa's car. We both drive sensible sedans, mine silver, hers white, and I've always been particular about maintenance schedules. When I checked her mileage for the oil change reminder, the numbers didn't add up. Tessa claimed she'd driven 200 miles that month, mostly to charity meetings and campaign events for her upcoming city council run. But her actual mileage showed 2,047, 847 extra miles. That's a lot of charity work. So I did what any boring husband would do. I investigated. Not with private detectives or dramatic confrontations, but with the methodical attention to detail that makes me good at my job. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, perfectly legal since both our names are on the title. I started checking credit card statements more carefully. I began paying attention to the little things that had been sliding past me for months. The tracker revealed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday afternoon, Tessa's car made the same detour. Downtown to a converted warehouse district, specifically to a loft building on Commerce Street. Unit 4B, registered to Marcus Verrin. The same Marcus now watching my wife describe my boring predictability to a room full of potential bidders. I gathered more evidence. Hotel keycards in her purse from places she'd never mentioned visiting. Restaurant receipts for expensive dinners during times she claimed to be in budget meetings. Photographs I took from the parking garage across from Marcus's building showing Tessa's white sedan in his assigned space. Text messages recovered from our shared cloud backup. Messages that painted a very different picture of my wife's afternoon activities. My sister Mira helped with the technical aspects. She works in IT security and sits on the charity's board, which gave her access to the event planning systems. Mira has always been protective of me, probably because I'm the only family she has left since our parents passed. When I explained what I'd discovered, she didn't waste time on sympathy or advice. She just asked what I needed. What I needed was tonight. What I needed was this moment, this microphone, this audience. The auctioneer, a professional from one of Houston's premier houses, steps forward to begin the bidding. Lot 47, Dinner with Merrin. Starting bid is $50. Do I hear 50? A few hands go up half-heartedly. Someone calls out, "Does he come with conversation cards?" More laughter. I start walking toward the stage. The auctioneer continues, "I have 50. Do I hear 75? 75 for an evening of architectural insights and salmon expertise." I reach the stage steps. Tessa notices me approaching, and her smile falters slightly, but she recovers quickly. She probably thinks I'm going to play along, maybe make some self-deprecating joke about being the evening's comic relief. She's wrong. "Excuse me," I say, loud enough to carry without the microphone. May I address the bidders? The auctioneer looks confused, but hands me the mic. The room quiets, 300 faces turning toward the stage with mild curiosity. Tessa's smile has gone rigid. Thank you, I say into the microphone, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I'd like to sweeten the deal for lot 47. I reach into my jacket and withdraw a leather portfolio embossed with the charity's logo. Inside are 6 weeks of documentation: photographs, receipts, GPS logs, text message printouts, hotel records. Everything organized chronologically, cross-referenced, and annotated with the kind of attention to detail that my boring personality excels at. Whoever wins this auction doesn't just get dinner with the boring husband, I announce. They also get all the evidence of my wife's affair with your event coordinator, Marcus Varron. Bidding starts at $1. The silence that follows is absolute. 300 people freeze like someone hit a pause button on reality. Tessa's face goes white, then red, then white again. In my peripheral vision, I see Marcus calculating exit routes. Then Selah Varron's hand rises from table 12. $500, she says clearly. The room explodes. Let me back up and explain how a boring husband becomes a forensic accountant in his own marriage. It started with the mileage, but it didn't end there. Once you begin looking for deception, you find it everywhere, like turning on lights in a house you thought was empty and discovering all the rooms you never knew existed. Tessa has always been organized, which made the investigation easier than it should have been. She keeps receipts, maintains calendars, documents everything for tax purposes. The problem was that her documentation told 2 different stories, depending on which records you examined. Her official calendar, the one she shares with me through our family planning app, showed charity meetings, campaign strategy sessions, and lunch appointments with potential donors. Tuesdays and Fridays were blocked out as board meetings or site visits. But her credit card statements revealed a different pattern. Expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, boutique hotels in the arts district, parking fees for areas nowhere near the charity's offices. I spent 3 weeks building a timeline, not because I enjoyed playing detective, but because I needed to be absolutely certain before I acted. Boring husbands don't get second chances at dramatic revelations. The breakthrough came when I found Tessa's backup phone. She'd hidden it in her car's glove compartment, probably thinking I'd never look there since I rarely drive her sedan. It was a basic smartphone, the kind you can buy with cash at any electronics store. The phone contained 6 months of text conversations with Marcus, and reading them was like discovering my wife was a completely different person. The Tessa in those messages was playful, flirtatious, and spontaneous. Everything she used to be with me, back when we were dating. She sent photos I'd never seen, made plans for weekend getaways I knew nothing about, and discussed intimate details of our marriage with someone who was essentially a stranger to me. Marcus, for his part, came across as smooth and encouraging. He called her brilliant and underappreciated. He told her she deserved better than a husband who couldn't see her potential. He promised her excitement, adventure, and a life worthy of her ambitions. Reading those messages was like watching my marriage dissolve in real time, 6 months after it had actually happened. But the most revealing discovery came when I cross-referenced their meeting times with charity event schedules. Marcus had been billing the organization for consulting services that coincided exactly with his hotel stays with Tessa. $47,000 in fraudulent invoices over 8 months, all approved by my wife in her capacity as board chairwoman. That's when I called Mira. My sister works for a cybersecurity firm downtown, the kind of place that helps corporations recover from data breaches and insider theft. She's 5 years younger than me, but has always been the more practical one. When our parents were in their final years, Mira handled all the legal and financial arrangements while I focused on their medical care. She approaches problems like a surgeon, identify the issue, plan the solution, execute without hesitation. You need to document everything, she told me when I explained the situation. Not for revenge, but for protection. When this comes out, and it will come out, you want to control the narrative. She helped me set up proper evidence collection. We used her company's forensic software to create certified copies of all digital records. We photographed documents with metadata preservation. We established a timeline that would hold up to legal scrutiny, even though I had no intention of involving lawyers if I could avoid it. Why the charity gala? Mira asked during one of our planning sessions. You could expose this privately, handle it through divorce proceedings. Because she made it public first, I explained. She turned our marriage into entertainment. She's been mocking me to 300 people for months, using charity events to showcase how clever and sophisticated she is compared to her boring husband. She chose the venue. Mira nodded slowly. You want to beat her at her own game. I want to show everyone who the real performer is. The final piece fell into place when I discovered Marcus's background. Mira's contacts in corporate security ran a comprehensive check, the kind that goes deeper than standard employment screening. Marcus Varron had a previous fraud conviction in Pennsylvania, sealed records from a case involving embezzlement from a nonprofit organization. He'd moved to Houston specifically to escape that history, building a new reputation in a city where nobody knew his past. He's running the same playbook, Mira observed. Charm the board leadership, gain access to financial systems, skim consulting fees, probably planning to disappear before anyone notices the missing money. Except this time he got involved with the wrong man's wife. This time he got involved with the right man's sister, Mira corrected. I'm not letting him destroy a charity that does actual good work because he can't keep his hands off married women. 3 days before the gala, we finalized our strategy. Mira would ensure I had stage access during the auction segment. She'd position the event photographers to capture reactions from key participants. She'd have the charity's legal team on standby to address the financial irregularities we'd discovered. I would handle the public revelation. Are you sure about this? She asked the night before the event. Once you do this, there's no going back. Your marriage is over, Marcus's career is finished, and you'll be the guy who aired his personal drama at a charity function. My marriage was over 6 months ago, I replied. I just didn't know it yet. And as for airing personal drama, that's exactly what Tessa's been doing every time she makes jokes about her boring husband. I'm just changing the punchline. The leather portfolio sat on my desk, containing 6 weeks of methodical documentation. Hotel receipts, GPS logs, photographs, text message transcripts, financial records showing Marcus's fraudulent billing. Everything organized with the same attention to detail I bring to architectural projects, because structure matters whether you're building a foundation or destroying one. What happens after? Mira asked. After, we see who's really been paying attention. The explosion of voices that follows Selah Varron's bid creates a sound I've never heard before. 300 people trying to process the same shocking information simultaneously. It's like a flock of birds taking flight, all wings and confusion and sudden movement. Tessa stands frozen at the podium, her mouth slightly open, still holding the microphone she was using to introduce the next lot. Marcus has gone completely pale, his carefully styled appearance suddenly looking like a costume he's forgotten how to wear. But Selah remains seated calmly at table 12, her hand still raised, waiting for the auctioneer to acknowledge her bid. I'm sorry, the auctioneer stammers, clearly outside his professional experience. Could you repeat that? $500, Selah says again, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. For dinner with Mr. Merrin and the evidence he mentioned. The auctioneer looks desperately toward the event organizers for guidance, but Marcus has disappeared. I scan the room and spot him near the service entrance, trying to blend into the catering staff's controlled chaos. He's not running exactly, but he's definitely repositioning. This is ridiculous, Tessa finally finds her voice. Hayes, what are you doing? This is a charity event, not some kind of personal... 500 going once, I interrupt, taking the auctioneer's role since he seems incapable of continuing. Do I hear 600? Several hands shoot up around the room, though I suspect they're bidding more for the entertainment value than actual interest in dinner conversation. The crowd has shifted from shocked silence to fascinated engagement, like they're watching a particularly dramatic television show. 600 from table 8, I announce. Do I hear 7? 700, calls someone from the back of the room. 800, Selah counters without hesitation. Tessa finally moves, stepping toward me with the kind of forced smile she uses when trying to control situations that are sliding away from her. Hayes, honey, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Why don't we... $1,000. Selah's voice cuts through Tessa's attempted damage control. The room falls silent again. $1,000 is serious money, even for this crowd. It's also more than double what any previous auction item has commanded tonight. I look directly at my wife. No misunderstanding, Tessa. Just full disclosure. Isn't that what you always tell your campaign volunteers? Transparency in public service? Her composure cracks slightly. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm being authentic. Isn't that what Marcus told you I should try? I found those text messages, by the way. The ones where you two discussed how I needed to be more spontaneous, more exciting. Well, surprise. The crowd murmurs at this additional revelation. I see phones coming out, people starting to record. In 30 seconds, this moment will be preserved forever on social media. 1,000 going once, I continue the auction. Going twice? 1,500, someone calls from table 6. Selah doesn't hesitate. 2,000. Now we're in serious territory. $2,000 represents genuine commitment to whatever outcome this auction produces. I study Selah's face, trying to understand her motivation. She's Marcus's wife, but she's bidding for evidence of his affair with clinical determination, like she's purchasing office supplies rather than documentation of her husband's betrayal. 2,000 going once, I announce. Going twice? Hayes, stop this immediately, Tessa hisses, moving closer to me. You're ruining everything. I'm improving everything, I reply. For the first time in months, people are paying attention to what I have to say instead of laughing at jokes about my dessert preferences. Sold, I announce before anyone can raise the bid further, to Mrs. Selah Varron for $2,000. The crowd erupts again, but this time it's different. Instead of shocked confusion, there's an undercurrent of excitement, like they've witnessed something unprecedented. Phones are definitely recording now, and I can see the charity's official photographer capturing every moment from multiple angles. Selah rises from her seat and begins walking toward the stage. She's a tall woman, probably in her early 40s, with the kind of understated elegance that comes from genuine confidence rather than performance. Her dress is expensive, but not flashy. Her jewelry minimal, but clearly valuable. Everything about her suggests someone who makes careful decisions and follows through on them. "Where's Marcus?" someone calls out from the audience. I scan the room again. The service entrance where I last spotted him is now empty. Excellent question. Marcus, your wife just purchased evidence of your extracurricular activities. Don't you want to congratulate her? Tessa grabs my arm. Hayes, please. Let's discuss this privately. There are explanations. I'm sure there are, I reply, gently removing her hand. But Mrs. Varron paid for transparency, and she deserves to get what she bought. Selah reaches the stage and extends her hand to me. Mr. Merrin, I believe you have something for me? I hand her the leather portfolio. 6 weeks of documentation, GPS logs, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, text message transcripts, and financial records showing billing irregularities. Everything's organized chronologically. She accepts the portfolio with the same calm efficiency she's displayed throughout this entire exchange. Thank you. This will be very helpful for my attorney. You're filing for divorce? Someone calls from the audience. Selah turns toward the crowd with a slight smile. I'm filing for justice. There's a difference. The ballroom erupts in applause. Actual applause, like she just delivered the closing argument in a courtroom drama. I realize that somewhere in the last 10 minutes, the crowd's sympathy has shifted entirely. They're no longer watching a boring husband embarrass himself. They're watching a wronged woman take control of her situation. Tessa seems to realize this too. Her face has gone through several color changes, and she's looking around the room like she's searching for allies who are no longer there. Ladies and gentlemen, I announce into the microphone, Mrs. Varron has purchased Lot 47, which includes dinner with the boring husband and all accompanying evidence. The charity benefits, justice is served, and I finally get to be interesting at a social event. I'd call that a successful auction. More applause, mixed with laughter that sounds different from the earlier mockery. This laughter includes me rather than excluding me. Selah steps to the microphone. If I may address the room? I gesture for her to proceed. This charity does important work for children who need medical care, she says, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to public speaking. My husband's personal failings shouldn't diminish that mission. I'm increasing my donation tonight to $10,000, and I encourage everyone here to focus on why we came together, to help kids who need our support. The applause this time is thunderous. Selah has managed to redirect attention back to the charity's mission while simultaneously making herself the evening's hero. It's a masterful piece of public relations that makes Tessa's earlier comedy routine look amateurish by comparison. As the noise dies down, I notice that Marcus has reappeared near the back of the room, probably thinking the worst has passed. But Selah notices him too. Marcus, she calls out, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Could you join us on stage? I think the audience would like to hear your perspective on tonight's revelations. Every head in the room turns toward the back, where Marcus looks like he's considering whether to run or disappear into the floor. The crowd waits expectantly. This is the moment when everything changes forever. Marcus Varron stands at the back of the ballroom like a man calculating the distance to the nearest exit versus the social cost of running away from his wife's public challenge. 300 faces have turned toward him, and the silence stretches long enough that people start shifting in their seats. He chooses poorly. Instead of approaching the stage or gracefully declining, Marcus attempts to blend back into the crowd, turning toward the service corridor like he's suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. But the crowd has formed an impromptu spotlight of attention, and his movement creates a ripple of murmurs and pointing fingers. Marcus seems to have urgent coordinator duties, I observe into the microphone. Very dedicated to his work, that one. A few people laugh, but it's nervous laughter now. The entertainment value of watching someone's marriage implode in public is starting to feel uncomfortably real. Selah maintains her composure, but I catch a flash of something harder in her expression. Marcus, we should discuss the billing irregularities Mr. Merrin mentioned. The board will want explanations. That stops him. Marcus freezes near the service entrance, probably realizing that running away from personal embarrassment is one thing, but fleeing from financial misconduct allegations is something else entirely. He turns back toward the stage, and I can see him trying to reassemble his public persona. Marcus has always been smooth, the kind of man who can talk his way into or out of most situations. But his usual confidence looks forced now, like he's wearing a suit that no longer fits properly. There seems to be some confusion, he says, his voice carrying across the room but lacking its usual authority. I think we should handle any concerns through proper channels, not during a charity event. The charity event where you've been coordinator for 2 years? Selah asks. The same position that gave you access to financial systems and approval processes, those proper channels. I watch this exchange with growing appreciation for Selah's strategic thinking. She's not just confronting a cheating husband, she's systematically dismantling his professional credibility in front of everyone who matters in Houston's nonprofit community. Tessa finally finds her voice again. This is completely inappropriate. Hayes, you've made your point, but we need to... Actually, interrupts a voice from table 4, I'd like to hear more about these billing irregularities. The speaker is Janet Morrison, who chairs the hospital's board of directors and whose family foundation provides significant funding for tonight's beneficiary. When Janet Morrison wants to hear something, people listen. Mrs. Morrison, Marcus attempts his professional tone. I'm sure any questions about administrative matters can be addressed through normal review processes. Normal review processes, Janet repeats slowly. Like the ones that should have caught $47,000 in questionable consulting fees? The room goes quiet again. Janet Morrison clearly knows more about the financial situation than Marcus realized, which means the charity's board has been conducting its own investigation. I look at Mira, who's sitting with the other board members at table 2. She gives me the slightest nod, confirming what I suspected. Our evidence gathering wasn't the only investigation happening. Mrs. Morrison, I say into the microphone, would you like to examine the financial documentation? Mrs. Varron purchased it, but I'm sure she'd be willing to share relevant information with the board. Selah holds up the leather portfolio. Of course, transparency serves everyone's interests. Marcus finally starts moving toward the stage, but his body language has changed completely. He's no longer calculating exit strategies. He's in damage control mode, trying to figure out how to minimize the destruction that's already begun. I think there's been some misunderstanding about my billing procedures, he begins. All consulting fees were properly documented and approved through established channels. Approved by whom? Janet asks. Marcus glances at Tessa, and that single look tells the entire room everything they need to know about the approval process. Tessa realizes her mistake immediately. The board reviews all expenditures. I don't personally approve consultant payments. But you do sign the authorization forms, Mira says, speaking for the first time tonight. As board chairwoman, your signature appears on every payment request over $5,000. The trap is closing, and I can see both Tessa and Marcus beginning to understand how thoroughly they've been outmaneuvered. They thought they were dealing with a boring husband's personal drama, but they're actually facing a coordinated investigation by people who've been watching their activities for weeks. I sign dozens of forms, Tessa says defensively. I trust department heads to provide accurate information. Trust, Selah repeats. Interesting word choice. The crowd is completely engaged now, watching this unfold like a courtroom drama, but I can sense the mood shifting again. The initial entertainment value is giving way to genuine discomfort as people realize they're witnessing the destruction of multiple careers and relationships. Time to bring this to a conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, I announce, I think we've provided enough drama for one evening. Mrs. Varron has her evidence, the board has its information, and I have my answer about where my marriage actually stands. Perhaps we should return to the charity's mission and let the appropriate people handle these matters privately. It's a graceful exit offer, giving everyone a chance to step back from the public spectacle. But Marcus chooses this moment to make his biggest mistake of the evening. Hayes, he says, finally approaching the stage, I think you're misinterpreting some innocent interactions. Tessa and I work closely together on charity events, and sometimes that requires coordination that might look... Innocent? I interrupt. Would you like me to read some of those text messages? Because I have them memorized. Starting with the one where you told my wife that she deserved someone who could appreciate her intelligence, unlike her boring architect husband who probably couldn't find excitement at a fireworks show. Marcus goes pale again. That's taken out of context. Here's some context, I reply, pulling out my phone. Tuesday, March 15th, 2:47 p.m. Text from you to Tessa. Can't wait for this afternoon. Hayes thinks you're at a budget meeting, right? He has no idea how amazing you really are. The crowd makes a collective sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. Reading the actual messages transforms this from abstract accusations into concrete betrayal. Should I continue? I ask. Because there are about 6 months of context available. Marcus looks like he wants to disappear entirely. Tessa has gone completely rigid, probably calculating whether denial or confession offers better damage control options. Selah saves them both from further embarrassment. I think we have enough information, she says firmly. Mr. Merrin, shall we schedule that dinner? I believe we have quite a bit to discuss. The crowd applauds again, recognizing her grace under pressure and her skillful management of an impossible situation. As the applause dies down, I notice that Marcus has finally reached his breaking point. He's looking around the room like a trapped animal, realizing that his reputation, his marriage, and his career have all been destroyed in the span of 20 minutes. He turns and walks toward the exit, not running, but not lingering either. Tessa watches him go, and I can see her making the calculation that following him would only confirm their relationship to anyone who still had doubts. But she follows him anyway. The room watches my wife of 12 years walk away from the stage, away from the charity she's chaired for 3 years, away from the political career she's been planning, and away from our marriage. The silence that follows is different from all the previous silences tonight. This one feels final. Well, I say into the microphone, I guess that concludes Lot 47. Mrs. Varron, I'll call you about dinner arrangements. And with that, the most interesting evening of my boring life comes to an end. The hotel ballroom empties slowly, like people are reluctant to leave the scene of something they'll be talking about for months. I stand near the stage, still holding the microphone, watching 300 guests file toward the exits while processing what just happened. Mira approaches first, carrying her purse and a satisfied expression. That went better than we planned. Did it? I ask. I just destroyed my marriage in front of everyone I know. You revealed the truth about a marriage that was already destroyed, she corrects. There's a difference. Janet Morrison joins us, followed by 2 other board members. Hayes, we need to discuss the financial irregularities you mentioned. Can you provide detailed documentation? Mrs. Varron has the evidence now, I reply, but I kept copies of everything. My attorney can coordinate with your legal team. Good. We'll need to conduct a full audit and determine the extent of any misappropriation. Janet pauses, studying my face. I'm sorry this became so public. That couldn't have been easy. Public was the point, I admit. Tessa made our marriage into entertainment. I just changed the script. Janet nods slowly. Well, you certainly accomplished that. The question now is what happens next. What happens next is that I go home to an empty house and try to figure out how to rebuild a life that was apparently a fiction for the last 6 months. Selah appears beside our group, still carrying the leather portfolio. Mr. Merrin, about that dinner, would Thursday evening work for you? You actually want to have dinner? I ask. I thought that was just part of the auction theater. I always honor my commitments, she replies. Besides, we have practical matters to discuss. Your evidence will be helpful for my divorce proceedings, but I may need additional documentation, and I suspect you'll need similar information about Marcus for your own legal situation. She's right, of course. The dramatic revelation was satisfying, but the actual work of dissolving 2 marriages and addressing financial misconduct is just beginning. Thursday works, I agree. Though I should warn you, I really do always order the salmon. She smiles for the first time tonight, and it transforms her entire appearance. I'll keep that in mind when choosing the restaurant. The crowd has thinned considerably, but I notice several people lingering near the bar, clearly hoping to overhear additional details. The story of tonight's auction will spread through Houston's social circles within hours, probably growing more dramatic with each retelling. My phone buzzes with a text message. I expect it to be from Tessa, but it's from my business partner. Saw the video on social media. Are you okay? Call me tomorrow. Video. Of course someone recorded it. By tomorrow morning, the entire confrontation will be available online for anyone who missed the live performance. Hayes, Mira says quietly, you should probably go home. This crowd is going to want to dissect every detail, and you don't need to be here for that. She's right again. I've accomplished what I came here to do, and staying longer will only invite more questions and commentary. Mrs. Varron, I say, I'll call you tomorrow about Thursday's arrangements. Please, call me Selah. After tonight, we're beyond formal titles. I hand the microphone to one of the remaining event staff and walk toward the exit. The hotel lobby is quieter, but I can see small groups of gala attendees clustered near the elevators and entrance, continuing conversations that clearly began in the ballroom. Outside, Houston's downtown spreads out under clear skies, the city lights reflecting off glass towers that house law firms, corporate offices, and financial institutions. Tomorrow, some of those lawyers and executives will be dealing with the fallout from tonight's revelations. Divorce attorneys will be contacted, audit firms will be engaged, and public relations consultants will try to minimize damage to various reputations. But tonight, I just want to go home and sit in my kitchen, maybe with a glass of wine, and think about what comes next. The drive to our subdivision, my subdivision now, I suppose, takes 25 minutes through mostly empty streets. It's a Tuesday night in October, and most people are home watching television or preparing for tomorrow's work. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that someone's entire existence just got rearranged at a charity auction. The house looks exactly the same as when I left 3 hours ago, but everything feels different. Tessa's car isn't in the driveway, which means she's either still with Marcus or driving around trying to figure out her next move. Inside, the silence is profound. For 12 years, this house has been filled with the sounds of shared life, conversations, television, the mundane noise of two people occupying the same space. Now it feels like a museum of a relationship that ended before I realized it was over. I pour myself a glass of wine and sit at the kitchen table where Tessa and I used to plan vacations, discuss work projects, and argue about whose turn it was to handle various household responsibilities. The normalcy of those memories feels surreal after tonight's dramatic conclusion. My phone rings. The caller ID shows Tessa's number. I consider letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity wins. Hayes? Her voice sounds strained, exhausted. We need to talk. I think we just did, I reply, in front of 300 witnesses. That wasn't talking. I don't know what that was. But we need to discuss practical things, the house, finances, how we handle this going forward. Where are you? A pause. Does it matter? Not really. But if you're calling from Marcus's place, this conversation is probably premature. Another pause, longer this time. I'm in my car, in the parking lot at Memorial Park. Memorial Park is where we used to jog together on weekend mornings, back when we still did things together. It's also about 15 minutes from Marcus's loft, which probably isn't coincidental. Tessa, I say carefully, tonight changed everything. You understand that, right? There's no going back to normal after what happened. I know, she says quietly. I never meant for things to go this far. Which things? The affair or the public humiliation? Either. Both. Her voice cracks slightly. Hayes, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. It's the first genuine emotion I've heard from her in months, and it catches me off guard. But apologies don't rebuild trust, and they don't erase 6 months of deception. I know you are, I reply, but sorry doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change what needs to happen next. What does happen next? We get divorced. You deal with the political fallout from tonight. I figure out how to rebuild a life that was apparently a lie, and we both learn to live with the consequences of our choices. The silence stretches long enough that I wonder if she's hung up. Hayes, she finally says, I'm here. For what it's worth, you were never boring. I was just looking for something that wasn't there. I know, I reply. That's why this had to end. After she hangs up, I sit in the kitchen for another hour, drinking wine and thinking about the difference between the life I thought I was living and the life I was actually living. Tomorrow I'll call my attorney, start the divorce process, and begin figuring out what comes next. But tonight, for the first time in months, I'm not bored. Thursday evening arrives with the kind of crisp October weather that makes Houston almost pleasant. I've spent the last 2 days fielding phone calls from friends, colleagues, and reporters who somehow got my number. The video of Tuesday's auction has been viewed over 50,000 times on various social media platforms, and I've become temporarily famous as the boring husband who got revenge at a charity auction. I meet Selah at a restaurant downtown, not far from the hotel where everything unfolded. She chose a place known for excellent food rather than social scene visibility, a decision I appreciate after 3 days of unwanted attention. She's already seated when I arrive, studying the menu with the same focused attention she applied to bidding on my evidence. Tonight she's dressed more casually than at the gala, but still with the understated elegance that seems to be her natural style. Mr. Merrin, she says as I sit down. Thank you for coming. Hayes, please. After Tuesday night, we're definitely beyond formal titles. Hayes, then, and thank you for the documentation. My attorney says it will be very helpful. The server approaches, and I realize this is the moment of truth about my predictable dining habits. "I'll have the salmon," I say, then look at Selah. "Sorry, apparently I really am that boring," she smiles. "I'll have the salmon as well. If we're going to be predictable, we might as well be predictable together." Over dinner, we discuss practical matters. Selah's divorce attorney needs additional documentation about Marcus's financial activities. My attorney wants to understand the full scope of the charity fraud for my own divorce proceedings. We compare notes about asset protection, custody arrangements, neither of us has children, which simplifies things, and timeline expectations. But somewhere between the appetizer and main course, the conversation shifts from legal strategy to something more personal. "Can I ask you something?" Selah says. "How long did you know?" "About the affair? 6 weeks? About the marriage being over? Probably 6 months, but I wasn't ready to admit it." She nods. "I knew about Marcus for almost a year. Not specifically about your wife, but about others. He's not particularly careful when he thinks he's smarter than everyone around him." "Why didn't you leave earlier?" "Same reason you didn't confront them privately, I think. I wanted to control how it ended. I wanted to choose the moment and the circumstances." We eat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both processing the strange circumstances that brought us to this dinner. "What's next for you?" I ask. "Professionally, I'm starting a consulting firm focused on nonprofit financial oversight. Apparently there's demand for that kind of expertise." She pauses. "Personally, I'm learning to live alone for the first time in 15 years. Any advice for someone just starting that process?" "Buy better wine than you think you deserve," she says, "and don't let other people's opinions about your choices become more important than your own peace of mind." It's good advice. For the last 3 days, I've been second-guessing Tuesday night, wondering if I could have handled things differently, more privately, with less public drama. But sitting here with Selah, I realize that the public nature of the revelation was exactly what made it effective. "Do you regret it?" she asks, apparently reading my thoughts. "The auction? No. The marriage ending? No. The way it ended?" I consider this carefully. "No, I don't regret that either. Tessa made our relationship into public entertainment for months. I just changed the script." "And now?" "Now I figure out what comes next. I've been half of a couple for so long that I'm not sure who I am as just myself." Selah raises her wine glass. "To figuring out what comes next." I raise mine to meet hers. To not being boring anymore. We finish dinner while discussing lighter topics: books, travel, Houston's restaurant scene, architecture, her new business plans. It's the kind of conversation I haven't had in years, where both people are genuinely interested in what the other has to say. As we're leaving the restaurant, Selah pauses on the sidewalk. "Hayes, would you like to have dinner again next week? Not for legal strategy or practical coordination, just because I enjoyed talking with you." "I'd like that," I reply. "Though I should warn you, I'll probably order the salmon again." "I'm counting on it," she says. Predictability can be a virtue when it's chosen rather than imposed. Walking back to my car, I think about that distinction. For months, I felt like I was boring because Tessa needed me to be boring to justify her choices. But choosing consistency, reliability, and thoughtfulness isn't the same as being boring. It's just being someone who values different things than excitement for its own sake. My phone buzzes with a text from Mira. "How was dinner with your auction winner?" I text back, "Interesting. We're having dinner again next week." Her response comes immediately. "Good. You deserve someone who appreciates salmon expertise." At home, I pour myself a glass of the better wine Selah recommended and sit in my kitchen, but this time the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels like possibility. Tomorrow, I'll continue dealing with divorce attorneys and financial audits and the various administrative tasks required to dismantle a 12-year marriage. The charity has suspended Marcus pending investigation, and Tessa has withdrawn from the city council race. The social media attention will eventually fade, and Houston's nonprofit community will find new drama to discuss. But tonight, I'm thinking about next Thursday's dinner and about the difference between being someone's boring husband and being someone who chooses reliability over chaos. For the first time in months, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I'm definitely not bored.